Welcome to Buzz's Speakers. This is Kush,
And this is Alex.
and today we're going to be reviewing Season High by Little Dragon. So
Yes, we are.
Little Dragon is like this funky electronic group. I'm not really too familiar with them. This is my first experience with them, but I've heard their name thrown around here and there, so they do have a bit of a presence in the music world. I'm just not really familiar with them.
I'm only aware of them because of their featured spot on Gorillaz' Plastic Beach album on the song Empire Ants, where lead vocalist Yuki Nagano gave a really cool performance. So I've always been meaning to try them out, but this is actually the first time I've heard an album by them as well, Kush.
So for me, this album starts off with "Celebrate," which is like has like a bit of Eastern influence tinge to it.
Yeah.
There's really interesting production, and there's like a really nice guitar solo about halfway through, and I think their instrumentals throughout this album are pretty decent. I'm not a big fan of their vocalist though. I think the vocalist is a bit too high pitched for me, and it's just kind of like hurts your ears a little bit.
Really, you didn't like her? That's weird. Because that's the reason why I wanted to check them out, was because of her.
I mean, she has a good voice, but I think throughout this album, she's just a bit too high-pitched for me to, like, thoroughly enjoy what she's doing.
So, did you like the song Celebrate overall?
Yeah, Celebrate is probably my favorite song on the album, because it's a really good opener, really fun, dancey, interesting. But some of the other songs were not as interesting and fun for me.
Celebrate was one of my lesser favourite tracks, because it has some guy called A-G-G-E, who I've never heard of, and there's like weird robot sound effects throughout the whole song, and like you were saying, the eastern part, I don't know, just that whole vocal effects on this were a bit off-putting, and it's so weirdly uncatchy. It has all the elements to be a catchy song, but it's so awkward and finicky. But I did like the guitar solo, to be fair.
That's a fair point. I mean, this album, I just wasn't really I couldn't get into it. I like the sounds they make and like some of the production styles. I just couldn't like get into it. Another song which I really liked was Butterflies.
Oh, yeah, I liked it, but you're missing all the highlights, and that makes me think that your least favourites are my favourites, so no.
Well, okay, what are your favourites?
They are Sweet, Should I, and Strobe Light.
Okay, so you're kind of right. Sweet wasn't that bad. I liked the instrumental. It sounded like it's kind of gamey, kind of retro. But it did sound like a bad attempt of a Flaming Lips song.
Well, yeah, she does have that feeling, because there's like psychedelic instrumentation on a few of these, and then an electropop vibe the same way Flaming Lips did. I really like Sweet. She sounds a bit like JK from Jamiroquai a little bit, because there's a loose sensibility in how she sings I find liberating. Like, her vocals are quite loose and raw. They're not polished, I'd say, throughout the whole album.
Yeah, the worst part about this song was that they had this sample of like a dog breathing.
Yeah, I did notice that, but I didn't mind it. It's weird, because the robot vocals I didn't like, but on here, I didn't mind them.
I just thought it was odd. And Strobe Light was probably like the most unoffensive song on this album. Like, I had no leaning either good or bad. It was just kind of there. It felt like a very filler song to me.
The reason why I like this song is probably a little bit biased. It's because it comes the closest to sounding like how she did on Empire Ants, the Gorillaz song where she's featured on. So it kind of reminded me of why I liked her in the first place. She just sounds really cool. I can't explain it much better than that. It's like she's getting more words per second done without taking a breath to sound cool. So yeah, that's a nice disco jam. It definitely
wasn't a bad song. It just wasn't anything mind-blowing or anything super interesting. It was like a good song, a decent song.
Yeah.
The worst song by far is Push.
Yeah, I agree. That is a complete trashy song.
It's so bad. I didn't understand what they're talking about until like towards the end. I realized this song is about a fucking porn audition or some sort of like showgirl audition or something, and the beat is super dated and it sounds like very old school, like, which is fine. Like I like throwback kind of music, but This was just really off-putting, this song. Not even like a fun way, it was just like really gross.
Yeah, that's the only song on here I didn't like. Just while we're talking about favourites, Should I liked just because it sounds extremely psychedelic and electropop in a similar way to Sweet, and I think it's the most obviously catchy song. And it's almost a bit like punk, even though, here's the thing, you can have a mentality of a punk in that you're really loose and fast-paced without actually sounding anything like punk, I think. In a way. So, yeah.
Besides, Should I was an okay song. It was okay. It reminded me of the Jackson 5 a little bit in the way they sung, or at least the vocal styles.
The Jackson 5? What?
Yeah, or like, specifically the song ABC. I don't know why.
Well, it did have a sort of sunshiny instrument similar to that.
Yeah, but that song was okay. Another song I did not like was the Pop Life.
The Pop Life was a bit weird, yeah.
Yeah, so with that song, my problem was that it started off okay. The synthy beat was a bit loud and like it wasn't mixed very well, and it sounded like a bit like Gambino on his new album, which was interesting. But it about halfway through, or like 3/4 of the way through, it just turns into a generic EDM song instead of like having that funky vibe to it that it had initially, which like it kind of ruined the song for me.
I didn't mind it. I thought she sounded a bit like Romy from the XX. Yeah. The song I found the most interesting was Gravity, because
Gravity was probably their most experimental and interesting song on here. But I think the problem, even though it's electropop, there wasn't one outstanding chorus on any of these songs. Like, nothing like I was like, that got stuck into my head, that was an earworm. It was all very monotonous and bland choruses.
Really, that's true, but I just found them catchy in their own way a little bit. But Gravity was
the only catchy chorus, just because like it's really repeated a lot, and it's like it's something I can easily repeat when you're singing back to it. So
I don't think you need a catchy chorus. Some of the verses were really catchy on some of these. That was enough for me. So yeah, Gravity is it's really experimental and raw. It's probably the most experimental and raw you could call electropop out there today. Here's the thing: there's a weird glitch percussion section, and then it sounds like there's a big spaceship coming from the sky about to abduct someone. There's like the sounds of loud engines warping, warp beams, and other things. That's a cool ending, I'd say.
Yeah, it was a cool. I think this album was much better in theory than in actual execution, at least for me.
Yeah.
I just really couldn't get into it, and I wanted to, because like I like some of the things they were doing. It was just not clicking for me. I don't know why. It just wasn't.
Well, if you don't like the vocalist of a band that much, then that's like the big first step to not getting into it too much, I'd say.
But for me, the vocalist wasn't even that bad. I think just everything that it just didn't flow together as a coherent piece to me. For me, like there were like every song had some decent elements to it, minus the song "Push."
Yeah.
But all the songs didn't fit very well for me.
Yeah, they were too disjointed and experimental in a way, and that becomes a problem when you're trying to be really catchy pop at the same time. Some people make it work, like Grimes, and I don't know why she's like the ground zero for experimental pop, but she's become that. And yeah, so here's the thing: there's some really cool and unique songs on here that I really like that I've mentioned, but it's just such a bad start to the album with Celebrate. Like, I don't actually like that very much. It's too much going on. And I ended it with, like, Push is a bit... Like, that's the second last song. You have to go through a lot of average stuff to get to the good stuff on here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So what would you rate it, Alex?
Here's the thing. The three songs I really liked. Sweet, Should I, and Strobe Light were really good songs. And I liked the whole atmosphere, and I really liked her vocals. So I'm going to give it 6.5. But there's some really cool songs on here, and it's really passionate and cool.
So for me, there were a lot of good things going on. It just there was only like one or two songs that really stood out to me as like, wow, this is actually something I listened to again. The rest of them were kind of forgettable at best, and at worst they were just god awful, like Push. That being said, I think this is one of the more polarizing albums from Little Dragon. I think the other ones are more like well regarded. So maybe this is just an off album and it wasn't the best introduction to them. So I'm not gonna throw them under the bus right now. I'm gonna leave my mind a little bit more open and check out some of the other stuff. But for me, it's a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check out some of their other stuff after this, because I believe they have much better material out there.
Well, if that's it, then thanks for tuning in to Busted Speakers. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check us out, or check out some of our other videos, and check us out on social media.